Number 10. The Ubayad Figurines. The Ubayad figurines are some of the strangest, rarest, and most unbelievable treasures ever found by archaeologists. The figurines depict what has been described as lizard people, and the strange appearance of these artifacts has led conspiracy theorists to label them as proof that reptilian humanoids have been sharing our planet for hundreds, if not thousands and millions, of years. Apparently, an ancient race of reptilian overlords have been right in front of our noses the entire time. Paleontologist and American-Canadian geologist Dale Russell suggested an interesting theory. Based on experiments, the possibility that some dinosaurs may have survived the apocalypse that saw the majority of their species go extinct, the remnants of this species could have evolved into highly intelligent life forms. Of course, this is just one theory. These lizard statues were found at the archaeological site Al-Ubayad, which ties with ancient Sumeria. The artifacts are believed to be 7,000 years old. One of the reasons why this is so fascinating is because the artifacts come from a place in time that is generally agreed upon by historians to be the beginning of civilization. Sumerians were believed to have created civilization as we know it at around 4500 BC, right around the time that these seemingly alien artifacts were made. This could be the direct link we've been waiting for between humans and reptilians. And it could indeed be proof that reptilians had a hand in creating civilization on Earth. Unfortunately, there have not been many mainstream scientific studies done on these figurines. We know they're real. We know they can be found all over ancient Ubayad sites, but it seems like the mainstream scientific community is completely ignoring their existence. Number 9. Grave Creek Stone. Discovered in 1838, amateur archaeologists originally discovered what is known as the Grave Creek Stone in Moundsville, West Virginia. Discovered in a burial mound that was built in various stages from 250 to 150 BC, the mound was home to various ornaments and other relics that are said to have contained a small, flat sandstone tablet inscribed with an unrecognizable alphabet. Wax impressions were taken of the stone in the late 1860s, which were later sent to the Smithsonian Institution. However, the original was supposed to be sent to the British Museum, but never made it there. The characters on the stone do not seem to have any alphabetical or phonetic equivalent. Some believe that they are symbolic or picture writing. To make it even more confusing, it isn't clear whether the lines of figures were supposed to be read from left to right or from right to left. A first-hand account of the excavation by a man known as Dr. James W. Clemens completely omitted the discovery of the tablet, which led archaeologists to wonder why he did not discuss the stone's discovery. It was later found that the discovery was only eliminated from the published version of his report. But why? Found in what is known as one of the largest conical Native American burial mounds east of the Mississippi River, the mound was discovered by European settlers around 1770. First excavated in 1838, it is the small stone tablet with its curious markings that have left a lasting impression, and brought many to the rural area to see if they might be the ones to decipher who left the stone there and why. Number 8. Royston Cave. Located in Hertfordshire, England, the Royston Cave is a bell-shaped chamber deep in the bedrock that continues to puzzle curiosity seekers. Located near the junction of prehistoric and Roman trackways, the cave is decorated with elaborate carvings that some say are comparable to medieval carvings found at sites across Central Europe and Israel, with some of the depictions including the crucifixion, the Holy Sepulchre, and various saints. Historians continue to work to identify the creators, who are believed to have created the drawings in the 13th century. Still, some academics continue to debate the origin and function of the cave, with some believing it could have been used as a secret meeting site for the Knights Templar. Discovered in 1742 when workmen uncovered a buried millstone that concealed a well-like shaft, the cave, which was filled with material, had to be excavated. Although initially people believed they would find treasure buried within, pottery, a human skull, and bones were found within the Royston Cave. Since 2018, the cave, located near Cambridge, has steadily deteriorated due to water penetration and worm activity, putting the mystical carvings at risk. Members of Historic England vowed to bring about conservation needed to stabilize the carvings and preserve the historic location. Number 7. Tonka Aden Tunnels, Japan. An ancient tunnel located in Japan has a similar mysterious aura as the cave found in Cambridge. Known as the Tonka Aden, the origins of the ancient tomb is still unknown. With the mystery of when it was built, by whom and for what purpose, various theories swirl around this ancient site. In the 1970s, archaeologists speculated that the system of tunnels and natural fissures could have been an ancient watercourse that dated back to the time of the 5th or 6th century AD. Ancient burial tombs in the area have been found to contain artifacts that look very similar to ancient Korean artifacts. Located in the hills of rural northern Kyushu, most are so narrow that only a child can crawl through them. Making these ancient tunnels even more compelling is the addition of a shrine with beautiful wood carvings at the end, as well as ancient burial mounds downhill that curious history buffs can visit. Have you ever visited a cave with mysterious findings inside? What was there? Were you scared? Tell me about it in the comments below. Then remember to subscribe to Talltanic if you haven't already for more amazing videos just like this one. Number 6. Prineste Fibula. Not all historical finds need to be big. In the case of the Prineste Fibula, historians continue to marvel at the gold brooch and its cryptic inscription. Currently found in the National Museum of Prehistory and Ethnography in Rome, the brooch contains ancient Latin script that, when translated, reads, "Manius made me for Numerius." First presented in 1887, the brooch, usually designed in a crossbow manner, was wildly popular in ancient times and found all across Europe. The Prineste Fibula was presented to the general public in 1887, although it wasn't necessarily the brooch that was so exciting, but rather the inscription on it. Described as being discovered in the Bernardini tomb in Palestrina, the fibula is made of gold and dates back to the 7th century BC. But even with its storied past, the authenticity of the pin continues to be debated. But regardless of where it originated and the meaning of the inscription, it still is a stunning example of an archaic object that is even more infamous now than it was in the ancient past. Number 5. Chiang burial dolls. Not all grave goods are created equally. One look at the Chiang burial dolls from a pre-Columbian civilization in modern-day Peru, and they do not look very different from modern-day rag dolls. However, these dolls are a connection to a mysterious culture that later fell to the Inca Empire. With a lack of written records about the Chiang culture, very little is known about them. But with archaeological remains and other objects discovered during excavations, the Chiang culture is believed to have had a certain degree of political power. Like other cultures, various pottery and clay items have been found in the archaeological record. But the so-called burial dolls are just one example of the textiles the Chiang are best known for. Made from woven fabric, most of the dolls are stuffed with reed or fibers. One example, a llama doll currently displayed in the National Gallery of Australia, was found to be stuffed with tiny round grains instead. Normally dressed in gendered garments that are woven to the size of the doll, most have tapestry-woven faces with dramatic facial features and are usually found holding an item in their hands, including a ball of cotton, a piece of yarn, or even a musical instrument. Believed to represent human beings instead of supernatural beings, the function of the dolls is unknown, leading to much speculation about their use. And the fact that they are usually found in graves is even more puzzling. Some wonder whether the figurines were children's toys and were possibly used by the person when he or she was alive. Others wonder whether they were made specifically to be buried with the deceased. Another theory ties to a similar function for shabtis used by the ancient Egyptians, who were known to be companions or servants for the deceased in the afterlife. Either way, these striking dolls are fascinating artifacts of an ancient culture and a unique example of their unique burial practices. Number 4. Ancient Syrian wristwatches. Who would have thought that a series of ancient Mesopotamian reliefs would cause such a stir in the historical community? Located in the eastern Mediterranean, Mesopotamia is located in what is now modern-day Iraq, Iran, Syria, and Turkey. The people of Mesopotamia contained various cultures who were bonded by their beliefs. These series of reliefs, or raised sculptures against a background material from ancient Mesopotamia, caused a stir when a number of figures were found depicted with round rosette-style bracelets. But why would these depictions be so controversial? Maybe it's because some believe the ancient art isn't depicting a simple rosette, but instead an ancient wristwatch. In the British Museum, a number of Assyrian artworks depict gods, goddesses, and kings, each wearing bracelets or armbands with the flower motif in the center. So, what exactly did this motif represent? The rosette is long believed to be a symbol of good luck and protection. So, which is it? A simple floral design or something impossibly modern? Other panels located in the museum show a man bringing an offering of severed heads to a ruler who is shown rewarding him with one of these rosette bracelets. So, what exactly were these rosette bracelets? Could they have been ancient wristwatches? In an ancient royal decree, one of the last Assyrian kings is said to have celebrated fearsome warriors by celebrating them with multicolored robes and binding the wrist with golden bracelets. However, in these ancient panels, the bracelets are seen higher up on the arms as thin bands, and not the rosette design seen in other pieces in the museum. While there is still much debate over these fanciful bracelets, the fact that they are shown in Assyrian art on protective spirits and celebrated warriors, as well as kings, goddesses, and gods, one must continue to wonder what exactly these unique accessories were really for. Number 3. Ancient Roman Signet Ring. An amateur treasure hunter in the United Kingdom stumbled upon what would become a fascinating find of a Roman figure of high status. Believed to date from around 200 to 380, the rare gilded artifact features an engraving of the Roman goddess Victory. Depicting the god riding a chariot pulled by 2 horses, the signet ring was often worn by nobility as a status symbol of power or importance. Usually, the rings would allow the wearer to make their mark with initials or a coat of arms in metal or stone, sometimes used to authorize documents by pressing the design in clay or wax. Popular for centuries and dating as far back as 3500 BC, the people of Mesopotamia wore cylindrical seals around their necks. Later, ancient Egyptians transformed the design into a ring, using it to seal important items. As for the ring discovered by the amateur treasure hunter, the 1800-year-old gold Roman signet ring, dating from 200 to 300 AD, was turned over to the British Museum in London to determine its value and pinpoint the origin of this stunning design. Number 2. Golden Earrings of Korea. When archaeologists were excavating what is known as the Gold Crown Tomb in Korea in 2015, they came across a pair of extremely rare gold earrings dated to the Silla dynasty, which ruled from 57 BC to 935 AD. Although hundreds of pairs of Silla gold earrings have been found in the tombs that belonged to noblemen and noblewomen in the past, the design of these earrings has never been seen before. Believing they had once belonged to a male, as Silla men often wore thin earrings, the tomb owner remains a mystery. Complicating the find even further, they were found alongside a sword engraved with the letters that read King Yisaji. Established in the mid-4th century, Silla is known for huge tombs that belonged to kings, queens, and aristocrats. Because gold was a symbol of supreme power, one would believe that the owner of the earrings must have been a very important person in ancient times. The discovery in the 1920s of these earrings, found alongside the body of a victim of what archaeologists believe was human sacrifice, are made even more mysterious by the fact that there is no mention of King Yisaji in any existing Silla records. Number 1. Canadian Bison Bone Pit. It's not uncommon for the land around Calgary, Alberta, Canada to flood during these spring months. However, in 2013, a local ranch owner found a stunning sight that would have archaeologists flocking in droves to the area. Spending weeks excavating at this site, researchers discovered deposits of thousands of bison bones at what is known as an ancient bison jump. As students from the University of Calgary's archaeology department joined archaeologists at the site, they excavated animal bones and artifacts including stone tools and ancient pottery. A buffalo or bison jump is an area where ancient Native Americans herded and drove bison over cliffs, which resulted in the animals breaking their legs and becoming immobile. Tribe members would wait below with spears and bows to kill the animals, which they would use for food, as well as using their hide for clothing and shelter, their bones for tools, and various other parts to make laces, bowstrings, glue, and for tanning hides. The flood in 2013 resulted in officials from the province receiving multiple calls from the general public, who had found bones or stone tools on their land or along the southern Alberta riverbanks. But this site at the FM Ranch would prove to be the most fruitful, with extensive site deposits that would provide archaeologists and students a fascinating record of human history. Number 10. A huge crocodile. One of the strangest things ever found in a river was a monster crocodile discovered in an African river north of Zimbabwe near the border of Mozambique. Of course, there are lots of different types of dangerous wildlife in the rural parts of Africa, but this was no ordinary animal. It was vicious and cunning, and threatened local residents with its presence. In fact, this huge and terrifying crocodile was so big that it had begun to feast on the local cows. It was so dangerous that the poor croc was hunted down and killed by an animal control officer. Nobody thought at the time to measure it, but the local villagers did get a photograph of the deadly crocodile, which experts have estimated to be around 16 feet or 5 meters in length. That's nearly as big as the longest saltwater crocodile in captivity today. If left alone, this river monster could very well have moved on from cows to people, devouring everyone in the local villages. Number 9. An Ancient Selvic God. In 1884, one of the strangest artifacts in archaeological history was pulled out of a muddy river in Ukraine after over 1,000 years of being forgotten. The artifact was a four-headed monolith carved with human faces and strange symbols. And ever since its discovery, it has confounded researchers all over the world. To this day, the outrageous four-headed monolith is the only existing monument to a Slavic culture that existed before the rise of Christianity. It's known as the Zabruch idol, which translates to English as World Seer. Historians believe the idol was probably representative of a Slavic god of war. It was probably pulled down and then thrown into the river as garbage sometime between 800 and 980, around the time when Christianity began to spread and become prominent in Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia. This was a time when other pre-Christian gods and idols were also being destroyed as the new religion took over. The idol itself is almost 9 feet or 2.8 meters in height. It consists of 3 separate tiers. On the bottom tier is a man on his knees holding the upper portion of the idol up. In the middle tier, there are 2 males and 2 females with their arms extended. The top tier is the largest and most dominant, and is believed to be the central god entity, with 4 different faces to represent 4 different unique attributes. Though, to be honest, historians still can't agree on what exactly all these depictions truly represent. It's still something of a mystery, even today. Number 8. Lost fuselages. Disaster struck in 2014 when a train jumped off the tracks and landed tons of cargo in the river below. Crews in Montana found themselves having to pull a trio of Boeing 737 fuselages out of the Clark Fork River after a train derailed and all of the precious items it was carrying landed underwater. According to Montana Rail Link spokeswoman Linda Frost, this was the first time the company needed to pull their own cargo out of a river. Strange, right? There was no listed explanation for this incident. Fortunately, nobody was injured when the 19 cars derailed, but a lot of damage was caused and valuable cargo was lost or destroyed. As for the cause of the derailment, it was still under investigation at the time of the report. Boeing had to send workers to the scene to assess the damage, seeing as these 737 fuselages belonged to them. Out of the 6 fuselages being carried, 3 landed in the river and the other 3 landed on dry land. They were supposed to be delivered to Washington, where they would eventually get assembled into new airliners. As if the fuselages in the river wasn't hectic enough, the derailed cars also dumped soybeans and denatured alcohol. What a bizarre mix of cargo to fall off the back of a train. Number 7. Bones in the Red River. A man in the Canadian province of Winnipeg made a rather grisly discovery at the bottom of the Red River. Barnatoth, a local man who loved the outdoors, had begun magnet fishing in his local rivers during the COVID-19 pandemic as a way to get outside and enjoy some fresh air. It was also a fun hobby that he could do with his family to help clean up the rivers. But what he hadn't expected to find were a bunch of bone fragments and a knife. At first, Toth said he thought he was just pulling up sticks. Upon closer inspection, he realized he had come across a deposit of bones. Not only did he find bones, but he also discovered a knife that could have been used as a murder weapon and a possibly related flashbang grenade. Naturally, the magnet fisherman called the police, and even though the authorities refused to comment on the situation, CTV News reported that the fisherman believed some of the bone fragments belonged to a human. Considering all the evidence, it looks like something pretty horrendous went down in the Red River. But since the police were keeping their mouths shut, we don't know the full scope of whatever tragedy happened here. Number 6. Mysterious cubes. 60 mysterious cubes covered in strange numerical inscriptions were recently found by another magnet fisherman in Coventry River in the United Kingdom. These cubes looked like something out of a Hellraiser novel. They were found by the fisherman and his 2 sons while they were sifting through shallow water. The cubes were small enough to be pinched between a person's thumb and forefinger. Each one was extremely light, and all of them were inscribed with neat grids and a language that appeared to be ancient Sanskrit. That's a language from India, which is nowhere near England. What brought these cubes halfway across the world? Nobody is exactly sure what these cubes are, though some people have claimed they could be connected to some sort of Hindu prayer ritual. They definitely appear to be Indian in origin, and the inscriptions on them were probably used for prayers while being thrown into the river. Nobody is exactly sure what ancient Indian artifacts were doing in an English river, and absolutely no progress has been made in tracing them back to their origins or even dating them. In all likelihood, somebody from India was traveling in the area and lost their prayer cubes. But there are more mysterious possible explanations out there. Number 5. Laughing gas and jelly beans. When volunteers decided to clean up the River Worth, also in the United Kingdom, they discovered some very unusual objects. In fact, they discovered a lot of unusual objects. The cleanup volunteer group pulled out stuffed teddy bears, a can of jelly beans, a large bag of clothes, several shopping carts, a large terracotta cactus painted gold, some thrown away license plates, an entire bucket of syringes, and perhaps, most strange of all, a bag filled with empty laughing gas canisters. Oh yes, and a small hoard of old toilets were found either inside the river or on its shores. Apparently, this river in Yorkshire has been used as a dumping ground for years. One of the volunteers even said he witnessed people pulling up in cars and throwing entire bags of trash over the bridge and into the river. The sad part is that even though the volunteers have done a great job cleaning up and finding cool stuff, chances are the river will still get filled with toilets and jelly beans again. Have you ever volunteered to clean up garbage in a natural place that was polluted? Where did you go? What did you find? Tell me about your experience in the comments below. Then, if you haven't already subscribed to Talltanic, do that now. More strange videos are coming out very soon, and you don't want to miss them. Number 4. Prehistoric Beartooth. A diver checking out the bottom of the Copper River discovered a fascinating animal fossil from a time long before humans ever lived in North America. Eric Prowl sees himself as an amateur fossil hunter, and he was thrilled when he pulled a prehistoric bear tooth out of the river. The tooth was about 3 inches or 7 centimeters in length, and belonged to a giant, short-faced bear, which went extinct a very long time ago. And, believe it or not, this wasn't Eric's first amazing find. The year before, he discovered a woolly mammoth tusk while combing the bottom of the river, as well as several dozen shark teeth and the jaw of a prehistoric cat. Giant bears appeared in the United States about 800,000 years ago, before spreading north to Canada. The average giant black bear then could reach about 12 feet when fully drawn up, and weigh about 2,000 pounds. But unfortunately, these bears went extinct roughly 11,000 years ago. Well, unfortunately for them, but fortunately for us. I know I wouldn't want to encounter a bear like that while I was out hiking. Would you? According to Richard Holbert from the Florida Museum, they were the biggest carnivores that have ever lived in North America. It's also likely that our prehistoric ancestors hunted them and eventually drove them to extinction. Those were some incredibly brave cavemen to go toe-to-toe with the legendary short-faced bear. Number 3. Mutant man-eating fish. In a river in India, a giant man-eating fish was targeting swimmers after having developed a taste for human flesh. This horrifying fish was a type of goonch, which is essentially a large and very hungry catfish. According to the report from the Daily Mail, the enormous fish had been feeding on corpses thrown into the Great Kali River following funeral ceremonies. The fish had likely been eating corpses for years and developed a lust for the taste of humans. This was likely what prompted the fish to begin attacking swimmers who dared venture into the river along the India-Nepal border. But don't worry, this fish was found and caught. The famous wrangler Jeremy Wade from River Monsters journeyed to this remote place and was filmed catching the mutant fish. Jeremy claimed that the goonch was not only large, but unnaturally large. It had eaten too much food and turned into a massive mutant. When Jeremy caught the fish, it weighed 161 pounds and was about 6 feet or 2 meters in length. For that species, it proved to be a record. The goonch was so big that it could have easily eaten a person, at least bit by bit. Number 2. Floating mummies. An ancient Egyptian mummy was recently found floating down a river of sewage. That's right, a legitimate mummy was found floating in garbage. Not just one mummy, but several ancient mummies and their sarcophagi needed to be retrieved from a river of dirty water, where locals found them floating near the town of El Minya in Egypt. According to a statement directly from the Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities, 2 never-before-seen mummies from the Greco-Roman era had been buried in tombs about 150 miles south from Cairo and left untouched for thousands of years. Of course, until some grave robbers uncovered their resting places and then dumped the mummies into the nearby irrigation canal to avoid being caught. Grave robbers had probably been working on an illegal excavation. Rather than risk being caught with the large mummies, they likely stole artifacts and antiquities and then dumped the bodies. By the time the authorities fished the mummies out of the river, they had been significantly damaged by the disgusting sewage water. In fact, Daily News Egypt reported that the sarcophagi had since disintegrated completely. And this is a huge shame, seeing as the mummies and their tombs could have proved invaluable to historians. They were likely buried sometime around 350 AD. Number 1. World War I machine gun. A treasure hunter recently discovered something incredible and deadly from over 100 years ago. Nick Lee discovered the treasure he pulled out of a Yorkshire river using a magnet as a once-in-a-lifetime find. He managed to pull out a Vickers machine gun from 1915 that may have been used by British soldiers while fighting on the Western Front. The Vickers machine gun was known for its reliability in battle and its durability. And after sitting underwater for 100 years, the reliability really shows. The gun was in fantastic condition, even though it had been at the bottom of a river for over a century. After World War I, a lot of used weapons ended up being melted down or thrown in rivers by local factories. This weapon had obviously been one of the latter. After the discovery of the gun, Nick was trying to find a museum willing to put the very cool war relic on display. What's the strangest thing you've ever found in a river? Number 8. Bannermans Castle. If you thought you had to travel to Europe to see a castle, think again. Nestled on Polypel Island in New York State, a crumbling ruin that once housed military surplus sits abandoned in the middle of the Hudson River, just north of New York City. The island is just a 30-minute boat ride from the eastern bank of the river, and here you can see the Bannermans Castle. It was named after Irish-born Francis Bannerman VI. The island was first spotted by the businessman in 1900 when he and his wife were traveling. Bannerman was looking for a place to house his growing military surplus collection that he'd been storing in a 7-story storage on Broadway in New York City. After purchasing a large cache after the Spanish-American War, he needed a place to expand, and he thought the island would be the perfect place to do so. He bought the land for $1,600, which would be about $50,000 today. He blasted a section of land to make a place for his warehouse. But that was just the beginning. Looking to create something a little more eye-catching than an ordinary concrete building, he brought in a team of day laborers to recreate the castle from crude sketches he'd done on scrap paper. It had terraced gardens, a dry moat, a drawbridge, and a smaller structure also added as a summer home and to welcome special guests. When it was new, it probably looked like something straight out of a fairy tale. But the idyllic setting didn't last for long. Some 10 years after setting down roots, an explosion in the nearby powder house broke windows on both banks of the river, and it could be heard up to 50 miles or 80 kilometers away. Luckily, Bannerman's wife, who had been sitting in a hammock, had briefly left to get a cold drink, returned unscathed, only to find a chunk of concrete in the hammock where she had been just moments before. Days later, most of the debris had been removed, but damage to the roof and windows was never repaired. After the couple died, the island was put up for sale, and most of the munitions were removed. The government of New York State bought it in 1967. Astonishingly, remnants of the cache still remain, with some estimates putting 50% of the cannons scattered around the US as originating from Bannerman Island. A fire in the late 1960s destroyed much of the castle, and weather took its toll on what remained. The castle is now overgrown and reclaimed by nature, and stands as a glimpse into the past of one man's dream to leave a mark on the Hudson. Number 7. Foxtrot-class submarine, Russia. The Foxtrot-class diesel-electric vessel was quite active during the Cuban Missile Crisis. This class of submarine nearly started World War III when a group that had been patrolling in the Caribbean were spotted by American surface ships. The submarines were pursued, with the U.S. dropping signal depth charges to locate them. A commanding ship of a small Soviet submarine flotilla believed they were under attack and that war had broken out. Armed with a nuclear-tipped tornado, the ship's political officer and captain were prepped to arm and fire the torpedo. Luckily, an admiral aboard refused to give his consent, and nuclear war was averted. The now obsolete ships have ended up in some very interesting places, with one even docked next to the Queen Mary in Long Beach, California. Another, left to rot in Amsterdam after being temporarily used as a presentation space, sits rusting as owners refuse to pay the towing fees to take the 1950s-built vessel away. Built in the Soviet Union, 58 vessels were built for the Soviet Navy, with 2 of its 3 decks dedicated to the batteries needed to keep the machine moving. It was a slow vessel that was crowded and relatively small compared to others. By the time the last sub in its class was launched, the design was obsolete, and with the last of the Foxtrots retired between 1995 and 2000, they are now a relic of the Soviet defense program. Have you ever been on a submarine? What was it like? Did you feel claustrophobic? Tell me your thoughts in the comment section below. Then remember to subscribe to Talltanic if you haven't already for more intense videos. Number 6. Herta Island Ghost Town, Hebrides. Over 100 miles or 160 kilometers from mainland Scotland, the St. Kilda archipelago sits in the Atlantic Ocean. With 4 islands out in the harsh water, Herta Island, the largest, has a storied past as one of the UK's most remote islands. Created by a volcanic eruption long ago, the rugged terrain has high slopes that plunge into the ocean and can only be reached via a small bay after an 18-hour boat ride from the mainland. Inaccessible much of the year due to turbulent seas, St. Kilda is known to have had inhabitants from prehistoric times, with the last of the residents leaving in 1930. Part of the Kingdom of His Excellency of the Islands in the 15th century, St. Kilda boasts a Viking settlement and the remains of Viking burial tombs. With limited resources, those who could tough it out relied upon birds for meat, eggs, and oil, as well as fishing when the weather permitted. Crops like potatoes and sheep, who provided milk and wool, also sustained these hardy people, who were governed by a council consisting of all the men on the island. Keeping mostly to themselves, residents began welcoming visitors in the mid-19th century, soon relying on the income to procure supplies during the short summer months. But life was hard on the island, and in the 1800s, when the Australian government funded immigrants to settle on the continent, some 42 islanders left Herta behind on a voyage across the ocean. Sadly, only half of the pioneers survived the trek to start a new life in Australia. Over the following years, life went downhill for the remaining islanders. Increased interaction with visitors brought disease and a sharp rise in infant mortality. The British set up a navy base on the island, but it was a double-edged sword. Islanders benefited from regular mail and supply deliveries, but in turn, they learned more about life on the mainland, and life on Herta did not look so idyllic in comparison anymore. In 1930, the last of Herta's residents were evacuated to work in the funerary forest in Scotland. Now, only the resident colonies of seabirds, including 100,000 puffins and gannets, call Herta home. Number 5. Islas de las Muñecas, the Island of the Dolls. Abandoned places like the Island of the Dolls in Mexico are scary enough on their own, but the dark past and how the island came to be is equally disturbing. Wondering how an entire island near Mexico City could become home to hundreds of decaying dolls? It all started when a man named Don Julian Santana Barrera, who was suffering from emotional problems, left his wife and family and retreated to the island. While hiding there, Don Julian discovered the body of a young girl who had drowned. Not long after, a doll came floating down the canal, which Don Julian took as an omen that he needed to appease the spirit of the dead girl. Hanging the doll in a nearby tree, Don Julian took on the role of island caretaker. But he did more than simply look after the place. Over the next 50 years, Don Julian collected dolls from the canals and from the trash, hanging them like the first doll in the island's many trees. Some were whole, but others were headless or taken apart. Over the years, the dolls became victims of the elements, with dirt and grime transforming them into a haunting display. Sadly, while his family never believed he ever found the body of a girl, Don Julian was convinced of it, and devoted the rest of his life to honoring her in this macabre way. Unfortunately, Don Julian went to his grave believing, and sadly, he too also became a victim of the very canal where he believed the young girl lost her life. In 2001, his body was found drowned, bringing to end the sad chapter of his solitary life. In a twist that might bring his spirit some comfort, people continue to visit the island to this day, bringing dolls that they hang in tribute to the mysterious girl who died there and the man who made it his mission to never forget her. Number 4. Cyprus Volosha Beach Resort. Do you think it would be cool to stumble across a ghost town? Well, for the first time since the 1970s, a ghost town beach resort in North Cyprus has reopened and is ready for visitors. The Volosha Resort had been abandoned decades ago, after Turkey invaded the island in the Mediterranean. For years, the island was considered a kind of no man's land between the two groups living there, with the area acting as a barrier between the Turkish north and the Greek south. But in the summer of 2020, local authorities hinted that the town would once again be open. Once home to 25,000 residents and boasting more than 12,000 hotel rooms, the popular island was known for its beachfront, earning it the nickname of the French Riviera of Cyprus. Once a booming resort town, popular with the rich and famous, Turkish forces took control of the island and blocked it off in the mid-1970s, after which the sun-kissed playground fell into disrepair. Now, after revamping the collapsing hotels and crumbling shopping district in the vacation town, the barren wasteland with its rusting barricades and fences is set to welcome visitors once again. Residents still live in the city of Famagusta, but the Volosha district had, up till now, been blocked off. In a stunning revelation, the Prime Minister of the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus declared that he was starting the process of allowing public access to the land, the streets, and beach. International authorities, however, were outraged by the move, believing it goes against international laws and decisions made by the UN Security Council. Still, the beach was, in fact, reopened in late October, with a handful of visitors snapping selfies in front of the still crumbling remains of the once buzzing tourist hub. EU representatives continue to be concerned that the move would cause more tension amid Cyprus settlement talks. Although it may not look like the ghost town you pictured in your head, this beachfront resort, once a place for rest and relaxation, is one that continues to spark controversy. Number 3. Belgium Dadi Park, Moreland. Located in Belgium, close to the French border, the oldest amusement park in Europe sits decaying in the forest. Opened in the 1950s by a local pasture for the children of families visiting a local basilica, the playground eventually expanded into a theme park. It had a collection of amusement rides, including a long suspension bridge, swings, slides, a carousel, and bumper cars. Unfortunately, a series of accidents at the park took place on increasingly run-down rides. The last straw was a very serious accident in 2000, when a young boy lost his arm on one of the rides. As visitor numbers steadily declined, the park fell into disrepair and Dadi Park closed. At the time, it was only a temporary shutdown, with owners vowing to renovate and perform maintenance. But finding an investor and competition from other larger amusement parks put a dent in the plans, and the park was eventually abandoned. Over the following 10 years, several other attempts to revive the now crumbling park occurred, but nothing came of the efforts. Now, the one-time playground and amusement park sits abandoned and rusting among the plants and trees. Demolition of the park began in 2012, with urban explorers continuing to visit the spot. Finally, in 2016, the original owner decided to turn the relic into a green recreational and residential area. Number 2. Georgia Koch Pillar. A stunning site west of Georgia's capital city in Eastern Europe, the Katsiki Pillar is a refuge for monks who are looking to get closer to God in their worship. Difficult to reach, with no trains traveling to the remote region, the trek must be taken by car or bus, and once one arrives, there is a 20-minute hike up a steep pillar. But taking this arduous climb is worth it, because once you make it to the top of the 130-foot or 40-meter tall limestone column, you will find a church that was built in the 6th to 8th centuries. Dedicated to a 7th century monk named Maximus the Confessor, the church also has a burial chamber, a wine cellar, and 3 hermit cells. But it isn't only tourists who visit the site. Every day, monks living below the pillar make the 20-minute climb on a metal ladder that has been bolted to the side of the limestone rock to say their prayers. Interestingly, a monk named Father Maximi Kavtaradze lived on top of the rock for 20 years. But for those who want to worship there but are not too keen on climbing so high, there is a smaller church, monastery, and the ruins of an old wall and belfry at the base to visit. Number 1. Skellig Islands. A twin-peaked island off the southwest coast of Kerry County in Ireland, Skellig Michael, or St. Michael's Rock, was once home to monks in the 6th century who created a remote refuge on the site. Dedicating it to St. Michael, the patron saint of high places, Skellig Michael housed a refuge at its summit above the rough waves below. A precarious stairway leading to the top remains today, but it's not mortar holding the 1,000-year-old steps together. But the spectacular early medieval island monastic site is not only a beacon to curious tourists, it also houses many rare birds, including puffins and some 23,000 nesting pairs of a bird known as the northern gannet. While the first written account of the locale comes from the late 8th century, it's believed that the monastery could have been established as early as the 6th century. There are also reports of rampaging Vikings coming to Skellig Island in the 9th century, believing the monks were housing valuable objects. To this day, the monastery buildings remain remarkably preserved. Beehive-type huts sit on a platform with crosses and a cemetery with 22 early grave slabs. Archaeologists believe that no more than a dozen monks lived here at any given time, and excavations at the site have found the remains of at least 8 individuals, all either adult males or children from 9 to 11 years old. Much superstition surrounds the island, with false tales of everything from unseen forces walking through the property to the belief that an ancient serpent temple had been built there. For those wondering what such a fantastical place might look like, you can catch an extensive glimpse at Skellig Michael in The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi movies in the Star Wars franchise. Which of these abandoned things was your favorite? Tell me in the comments below. Thank you for watching, subscribe to Talltanic if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time.
Oh.